Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us for today's Tropical Tracks. I know a lot of interest here already, folks in the chat, and I will try to get, let's say I'll try to answer your questions that you've asked through what I'm going to show you here in the graphics. And then if you still have questions, please, by all means, put it in the chat. We're waiting on the 5 o'clock advisory on Tropical Depression 9. When it comes in, we will show you the graphics, and you'll see it right away. I mean, the second it comes in, it will pop up here. I've been up since 4:30. I didn't even set my alarm for 4:30. I just went off. My clock, my internal clock, is now on the advisory cycle, and so it's been a long day, and unfortunately, I think we've got some more long days ahead. Now, let me stress before we go any further that if you like this, if you find it helpful, if you find it interesting, if you get something out of it, please like, subscribe, and hit the notify button. And please share it with your friends too, because a lot of folks, as a tropical system is threatening an area, everybody's hungry for information, and the more, the better in many ways. And for those of you who know me, I'm a no hype kind of guy. It's just, let's talk about what we know, we can talk about what we don't know, and the decisions we're going to have to make based on all of that put together. So right now we are operating on the 11 a.m. advisory. We don't get an intermediate advisory, a 2 p.m. advisory, until we get watches or warnings. There are no watches in effect right now. We're going to talk about the 11 a.m. advisory with the caveat that it may change a little bit here as we get to the 5 p.m. advisory, which we are waiting on. But once again, as soon as it comes in, it will pop up here first, and I promise you it will beat all the TV stations, every one of them. So this was as of 11 a.m., 35 mile an hour depression here, not a tropical storm. And I'll show you in a second here, close up on what it's been doing throughout the day. And I'm going to kind of break my presentation up into some segments here. So for those of you who haven't gone through a hurricane in Florida, I'm going to talk about all the things that we should be doing right now. Hang on for that. I've had a lot of requests for, can you talk about some more of the meteorology? And I'm going to kind of try to do both here. So if you're patient, hopefully I'll get to everything. But let's talk about this morning advisory in the first cone there. I see a tropical storm Hermine, which is the advisory for the thing that was Tropical Depression 10. So let me back up here because this was the morning advisory. So this is the 7 p.m. Sunday position there on the morning advisory, and then it's forecast to intensify to a hurricane. I'm not going to give a lot of time to the morning advisory because the afternoon advisory, when it comes in, we'll be updating everything. But the forecast from this morning was for a intensifying Category 2 and then major Category 3 hurricane there. That's the Wednesday morning time frame. Now, this reddish area here, this is based on the National Hurricane Center's wind speed probabilities. This is where the hurricane conditions are possible. The yellow area here, that is where the tropical storm conditions are possible. And you'll note that it is favoring the west coast right now. I want to stress there is a lot of uncertainty with this, much higher than normal. The models have been flipping around and flopping around like crazy. The European model, which I'll show you in a second, has been more consistent, but it's been more consistent with itself than the other models. It'd be nice if they were all consistent all together, but that's not been happening. So here's what's been going on today. It's been kind of interesting because we've had this really strong northeast shear. In fact, we kind of passed through the peak of the wind shear today, and that wind shear blew those thunderstorms off the center. In fact, there was the forecast track from 11 a.m. That's where the center should be. Let me mark it there. So that's where we should be right now, but this is where the center has ended up there to the north. It's not a lot. It's about 60 miles or so, but it's enough that it makes you wonder, is this going to have implications downstream? Now, one thing you'll catch here is that right at the end of the loop, the center you kind of lose it there. It starts to get under these thunderstorms again. So what's beginning to happen now is that the wind shear is starting to relax a little bit. And as the wind shear relaxes, the thunderstorms will be able to build over the center, and that's when the intensification will start to begin. And that's expected to start to commence once it gets underway, be rather quick. In other words, it's going to ramp up pretty quickly for the next several days because it's going to be going over such warm water in a low shear environment with the relatively high humidity. The shear shows up really nicely in the water vapor loop. You can see it right there. This is a shear that's kind of associated loosely with the outflow of Fiona blowing on, but also you can see that there's just not as much shear once you get over here in the Western Caribbean. And so with not as much shear in mind, then that's one of the prerequisites for intensification and better organization. Let's talk about the overall steering currents here and what's going on. This is our pattern. This is the European, what we call 500 millibars, like the middle of the atmosphere. And I'm using the European today because it's been more consistent with itself, and we've seen these big swings in the GFS model. So this is the European, and it's showing right now we've got a blocking high over the western U.S. We have a blocking high that's sending over the central part of the Atlantic. We have this dip in the jet stream that has picked up Fiona there, so that's left a bit of kind of a weakness or a wake in its wake, and it would give the opportunity for our system to go more northwest here. But I think once the thunderstorms get going here, it's going to tend to want to go more west. Now, if there wasn't anything changing and the dip and Fiona were moving on out, then it's likely that this blocking high would build back in, and that would have a tendency to steer our tropical depression off to the west and west-northwest. But let's go forward into time here, and you can see what happens. So here we are on Saturday morning, Sunday morning, and the tracks there, that's based on the Hurricane Center's 11 a.m. advisory. And this big jet stream dip starts dropping out of the Great Lakes Sunday morning into Monday morning, and it really breaks a big hole in the blocking high that was trying to build back across the area, but that is not going to happen because a big opportunity to go north is now developing. Now the question then becomes, that's Monday morning, as we get to Tuesday morning here, is this far enough south that it actually steers our system to the northeast? Or is it not far enough south, like some models are suggesting the possibility, where it kind of bypasses it and our disturbance goes off to the northwest? I'll show you the ensembles here because there's that split, it shows up, and so you'll be able to track that as we go forward into time. And then here we go into, this is Wednesday afternoon, and you can see the position there based on the 5 a.m. advisory. I do want to quickly kind of zoom in here and just talk about the trickiness of forecasting what is called an oblique approach. In other words, we're going at the coast at an angle here. So here is the West Florida coast right there, running south to north, and we're coming in at an angle. So a little bit of difference between there and there is a big difference along the coast in terms of who gets it. And sometimes this little bit of difference here can even be wobbles. And we're talking 5 days out. So these little differences, they're going to be hard to detect. Now, experience from doing this and watching storms that have done this come up like this tells me we really have to be careful with this because number one, we've got this turn that's going to take place somewhere in there. And number two, sometimes the models don't get the turn quite right. So does it turn a little bit earlier? Does it turn a little bit later? Those are all possibilities. So at this point, I would say we just can't focus on one area. We're way too far away from that. We really have to kind of all prepare across Florida, north to south, east to west, especially from at least right now the I-4 corridor down. But I think just about everybody up and down the peninsula should be prepared and kind of preparing in an equal way because it's not going to take much of a shift one way or the other to really move where the impacts are. This is the GFS, and you can kind of see here, it does have these members that miss that dip in the jet stream, that trough, and it has some members that also catch it, and the members are kind of tightly clustered there around the 11 a.m. advisory. So let's take a look at the European. This is the European ensemble here, and it has more members in it, and you can see it is much more clustered there right around the Hurricane Center's 11 a.m. track. Now, there are some members here that even almost miss Florida. You can't rule it out. It is a possibility. Most of the members, where the highest possibility is, go very close to the Hurricane Center track, and then there are a few members over here that are off to the west. This just, I can't stress enough how much this bears watching as we go forward. So with that in mind, let's talk about what we should be doing right now because kind of that's the big thing, the closest approach to South Florida. And equally, I think because the chances right now are for greater impacts are higher right now on the West Coast. That doesn't mean that the East Coast won't see impacts, but are higher on the West Coast. So I think everybody from Tampa to Miami to Naples to the Keys, Key West, Marathon, Isla Mirada, Key Largo, everybody should be preparing kind of at the same pace right now because we don't want anybody to fall behind. So we're on this timeline now, and this the clock is ticking for our timeline here, and we're setting our clock to kind of the 4-day time frame here on our timeline. So that is basically where we're counting down from. So we prepare kind of methodically here when we go through hurricanes. It's not an all rush to the end. I know there are going to be some people that'll say, it's just going to be rain here. You know what? If you want to take that chance, that's your chance to take. For those of us like me who have seen too many storms that look like they're going to miss and then start turning, and that sickening feeling you get inside where you think, I should have done more. It's not a good feeling to have. You know what? It may work out very, very well for all of us. Let's hope that's the case, but there's enough chance that this is something we're going to have to deal with that already we need to prepare. So we're kind of at this point where it's not really a game, but it's a phrase here. What should we be doing now? Okay, we're 4 days away. So our timeline is getting a little bit shorter here, and what we are doing now is kind of starting to escalate a little bit. The thing is that at any point along the way here, if the forecast track shifts and shifts markedly, we can pause. We can just stop our preparations and start going into a watch mode. But for the time being, we are still in preparations. So now at 4 days out, and this is what you can be thinking about doing for tomorrow, this is where we will be basically, sorry, I'm getting set up for the new advisory on TD9 when it comes in. This is where we can top off on our meds, visit the pharmacy, and basically the rule of thumb is you kind of want two weeks worth of meds. Now, I know it's a Saturday, it might be hard to get medications and things like that, but you don't want to be kind of like just about to run out of medication there. So that's one of the things. This is the point also where we're going to want to get some cash on hand. And this used to be a bigger problem when we didn't have as reliable cell coverage and we didn't have ways to use credit cards. But the thinking here is that if we're in a big power outage that lasts for a while, it may be hard to buy things with credit cards because you can't, the stores can't verify the credit cards. So this is the point where we start to get some cash on hand just in case. And all this stuff is stuff that if we don't use it, thank goodness, we're going to use it anyway if we don't need it for a big storm hit. At this point also, I would say make sure your gas tank is at least half full. I know lots of folks are already getting gas for generators and stuff. And the rule that I heard a while ago, I hope it's still the same, but it was the Miami-Dade Fire Rescue Rule, which is no more than 20 gallons, storing no more than 20 gallons of gas. And then, of course, in certified containers that are meant to hold gas. And then if you can, in an outside building, I keep it right next to the garage door in case it leaks. It won't run, say, into or towards the center of the house. At this point, you really want to stay up to date on the system. I know there's a big football game on Sunday afternoon. I'll be there. Fins up. I know Bills fans are rooting too, but our minds are going to be easily distracted. But it's important not to kind of lose track of what's going on here. The one thing I always want to reiterate to everybody is you never want to be surprised by a tropical system. You never want to be end up saying, oh, I didn't expect that. So that's why we always think in terms of a range of possibilities. We think in terms of more of a bad scenario, so we're prepared for it. And then we hope for a good scenario where we don't have to do much. And then you know what? We're thankful that it passed. We got ready, but we didn't need to use all of our systems. I know a lot of you who have been through near misses are always grateful that it, in fact, it didn't come. The most recent case of that, of course, was with Dorian, but then Isaias was kind of a threat as well. Talk to your family about what's going on. It's good that everybody's on the same table. Kids especially, I think, need to kind of know what's going on. When my son was younger, I had what I called my hurricane distraction kit, which was board games. And my son would be like, we're not playing those. And I'm like, after your cell phone's dead and you're not on the internet for a few days, we will be playing those. So these are all things, kind of big family picture here. You're thinking about everybody, friends and neighbors, South Florida, all of Florida pulls through these systems when we all look out for and help each other. What is our hurricane plan? We talk about it at the beginning of the season. There's always a big push. Have a hurricane plan, have a hurricane kit. And then it kind of just goes quiet until we have a storm. So let's talk about our hurricane plan. The first thing about your hurricane plan is, do you live in an evacuation zone? Because if you do, you will have to move inland away from the zone out of the zone. You don't have to go hundreds of miles. You just have to get out of the zone because of the potential for storm surge flooding. Except for mobile homes and special needs cases, we don't evacuate for wind. We stay for the wind. We flee the water. That's the way it goes. Now, if the track that the Hurricane Center had at 11 a.m. Comes to pass, there's going to be a rather high storm surge threat, especially for the lower Keys, possibly the middle Keys, and the southwest and west coast of Florida. It's not certain yet. We're still some time before watches and warnings would come up, but that's certainly a consideration. And we'll talk all about the timing of when that stuff starts to happen. But folks in the Keys, keep in the back of your mind because the Keys does tiered evacuations, which means that first the visitors are asked to leave, and then the other residents, and sometimes it starts in the lower Keys and then the middle Keys and the upper Keys. If any of that happens, I think it's going to be focused on the lower Keys. I haven't heard anything yet, but these are the things, especially for our folks in the Conch Republic, you need to keep that in the back of your mind, as well as portions of the west coast that dealt with storm surge flooding and the storm surge risk in Irma or Charlie for that matter. These might be similar storms in terms of their track forecast and their potential impact. You never want to say it's going to be like that storm because every storm is a little bit different. Do we have special needs? Do we have an oxygen machine that needs power? And if it goes many days without power, you're going to have some problems. These are all things you need to think about too. At least as far as I know in Miami-Dade, hopefully it's still the case, you can pre-register for special needs shelters. I don't know that this is going to be that type of event for South Florida. We're still a little far away from checking that out. But these are all things that you need to know. And also, the way it was, at least as of last year, is if you have pets and you're going to a shelter, you have to pre-register, and it has to be a pet-friendly shelter. Let's hope we don't get that far, but that certainly is something that we keep in our minds. Remember, we don't want to be surprised. We want to think about all of this ahead of time. Do we have a communication plan? My brother lives in the Tampa Bay area. He knows what I will be doing. Well, he knows I'll be working during the storm, talking to you guys. And he knows that if for some reason the communication goes down and he hasn't heard from me in 2 days, then he's going to try to come here with some gas jugs and see what's going on. Same story for him. Tampa Bay takes an impact. After 2 days, if I haven't heard from him, I'm heading up there. Probably a chainsaw and some gas in hands. You know, and the thing is, and this kind of goes to that post-storm thing, because most of our preps, the things that we do and the things that we get, it's for after the storm. Now, of course, flashlights, things like that, that's for during the storm, but it's really after the storm that we are doing most of our preparations for. That's what our hurricane kit is for. And I said chainsaw, and that's what triggered this and the gasoline. After the storm, you have to be very, very careful. Usually, emergency services are strapped. It's hard to get to emergency calls. You don't want to let anything happen. Take your time on the cleanup. Don't get out there and aggressively clean up. Be careful with the generator. Always have a carbon monoxide detector with you in the house. Make sure it works if you're going to be running a generator. Carbon monoxide poisoning is one of the highest, deadliest factors after a storm has hit. And so those are all things we have to watch out for. Do you have food, water, and medicine for at least 5 days? I say have 5 gallons of water per person. Does it have to be all bottled water? No. I take my bottled water, as you probably saw on Twitter, I freeze it, and if the power goes out, I open the freezer door, put the bottled water in a cooler that I have next to it, open the refrigerator, put some food in there that I know I'm going to eat, close it, I don't open it again. And I'm going to post another kind of a hurricane life hack here on Twitter in just a little bit about the old, how do you know if the freezer has thawed? I'll show you that on Twitter coming up a little bit later this afternoon. All right, what's in our hurricane kit? Working flashlights. It's a flashlight that you're going to test, and you're going to pre-position at places around the house so that if during the night power goes out, you know where to find it right away. Okay. And speaking of power outages, that's usually the biggest and the most widespread effect of a hurricane event. Most folks don't suffer major damage to their homes, thankfully. A few do, that's always a possibility, but the majority of people that go through a hurricane, it's power outages, it's trees down, it's damage to roofs and fences and things like that. So most of us are kind of preparing, in this case, for power outages. but depending towards the end, when we get closer where the storm's going to go, us folks who might be in more of the line of where the center is going to go might have to prepare for something higher. In terms of the power outages, also practice it with your kids. You know what? Tonight or a couple nights from now, I'm going to remind my son, hey, we're going to turn off all the lights and just see how we get around without any lights on. Do that with your kids so that when it happens, if it happens, they're not scared by the power outage. Battery-powered AM and FM radio. Once power goes out, your Wi-Fi router may go out. Eventually, cell towers may go down. You need information, and that's the best way to get it in South Florida. Of course, a first aid kit as well. Non-perishable food, plastic plates, cups and utensils, things like that. That is kind of it for what is going on with that. Once again, we are still waiting on the advisory, which should be coming in. Let me briefly address while we're waiting on that advisory, and the second it comes in, we will pop it up, and we're gonna take a different approach to showing where the cone and the forecast track is. We're gonna kind of move along the forecast tropical storm winds and see what time they're expected to arrive, and then we kind of get a better idea, at least based on the 5 o'clock advisory, what's going on. Lots of fins up, fins up. NHC updates the track every 6 hours. So at 11 a.m., 5 p.m., 11 p.m., and 5 a.m. That's when the track updates. Now, okay, here the advisory is coming in, so let's go ahead and put it up. And then as soon as we get the new track here, we will have everything. So first off, it's still a tropical depression, winds at 35 miles an hour, moving west-northwest at 15 miles an hour. It looks like their center point there is kind of an average, didn't really follow quite as far north. I'm just kind of spitballing here of where it went, and we'll wait for the rest of the advisory. And there it is, that's the advisory. So there's the advisory on the bottom of the screen there. So you've got it first right here. And we can start talking about the track now as well. I'm going to grab a copy of the printout here and see if there's anything right off the headlines here that kind of jump out. Well, it's a long advisory, so it's already printed 3 pages there. So let's see. First off, are there any watches and warnings? Yes. So the government of the Cayman Islands has issued a hurricane watch for the Cayman Islands, and the government of Jamaica has issued a tropical storm watch for Jamaica. So tropical storm watch now for Jamaica, hurricane watch for the Cayman Islands. And so with watches, a hurricane watch means hurricane conditions are possible within 48 hours, and a tropical storm watch means tropical storm conditions are possible within 48 hours. What was the headline here that you guys saw there? Hurricane watch issued. Air Force hurricane hunters en route to investigate the depression. So let's talk about this track now, and we'll break it down in terms of timing here. And so we're going forward. This is the new track, and what you're going to see here as we go forward is up in the upper left-hand corner, it's the estimated time of arrival. It's not precise, so it's not something you're going to say, well, it's going to be here at 8 a.m., so we need to finish up by 6 a.m. This is just giving us some ballpark figures, and because the track may change a little bit here in the coming days, that timeline might also change. And if the storm grows or gets more lopsided or something like that, all those things kind of also tend to change what's going on. So let me see if there's anything else new that's coming in here. No, that's Fiona's advisory coming in here. So here we are. The forecast is for it to become a tropical storm as we go into the overnight hours and tomorrow afternoon. So that's the Saturday at 1 a.m. and then here we are Saturday at 1 p.m. and then going forward here, and we're closest to Jamaica here, and there's Sunday at 1 a.m. So there's our closest approach to Jamaica, and you can see why they would have a watch there. There is Sunday at 11 a.m., and you can see that yellow area just about getting to Jamaica. That's where the tropical storm conditions, at least in the shorter term of this advisory, are expected. So makes sense, right? Tropical storm watch because there's the possibility, not the expectation, but the possibility of tropical storm conditions. Let's go forward here. So there is Sunday at 1 p.m. Forecast is still for a tropical storm. And then here we are. This is Sunday night. Once again, the yellow area is the tropical storm conditions. This is Sunday night, so Monday morning at 1 a.m. So this is just after midnight there, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. kind of time frame here. I don't know why my hours say 1 a.m. I think my time zone might be incorrect. Close enough. We've got the numbers up there in the upper left-hand corner. And the forecast is for Category 1 hurricane. Now you can see the yellow area is beginning to grow as the wind field's beginning to grow. So the arrival, let's back up a little bit here, and so you can see there in the Caymans, there's Georgetown. This is Sunday at 6 p.m. So folks in the Caymans need to kind of get things wrapped up during the day Sunday. You don't want to be waiting until sunset Sunday night. So let's go on in. Now here we are at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m. So tropical storm conditions beginning to reach southern Cuba there. The far south areas, Cienfuegos I think might be in that area as well. And then you can see our red area here. That's the hurricane conditions. That's beginning to expand. So let's go on up here. We're at noon near Havana now. We're starting to get the tropical storm conditions moving in, and you can see the hurricane conditions continuing to expand. And you can see here, there we are, Monday at about 7, 8 p.m. So we'll say sunset on Monday. There looks like, based on this advisory and the information we have right now, the onset of tropical storm winds in the lower Keys. So we'll want to have everything wrapped up Monday well before sunset in the lower Keys. Let's go forward into time here through 10 p.m., 11 p.m. So now here we are to about 7 a.m. Tuesday morning. And you can see the tropical storm winds spreading on in into the upper Keys there, and the hurricane conditions now beginning to approach the lower Keys Tuesday at 7 a.m. Going forward here, you can see the extent of the tropical storm winds moving up the west coast now, Fort Myers, 9 a.m. Now let me just reiterate again, I'm calling off times here, but these times may shift if the track shifts, if the storm speeds up or slows down, or if the wind field expands. So these are just rough times. Don't call everybody and say we have to be blah, blah, blah by 9 a.m. Because these things are going to change, and we'll update it with each advisory as well. So that's 9 a.m. on Tuesday, and you can see the tropical storm conditions by 11 a.m. on Tuesday starting to enter South Florida here, but not as far to the east as the earlier advisory. So this would indicate possibly in this forecast advisory a little bit of a westward track shift there. Is it going to stick? We don't know, but because we know that there's been a lot of uncertainty with this, and there's probably a lot of uncertainty with this forecast track as well, which is, you know what, you work with what you know, and you go with what you know. So this is 11 a.m. on Tuesday, and then here we are now. There are the hurricane conditions, closest approach to the lower Keys there, tropical storm conditions kind of coming up the east coast, and the tropical storm conditions also getting into the Tampa Bay area, and this is 6 p.m. Tuesday evening. So let's back up here and let's say, when do we need to have things wrapped up? Well, in the Keys, we need to have things wrapped up on Monday, right? In fact, if we are going to get tropical storm winds along the west coast here on Tuesday morning, we need to have things wrapped up on the west coast Monday as well. Tuesday, it could be very stormy here in South Florida, so we need to have things wrapped up by sunset Monday, I would say on the southeast coast as well. This is 1 p.m. on Tuesday. It may not be possible from Fort Myers South to be working outside on Tuesday based on this advisory. So once again, Monday sunset, need to have things wrapped up. Tampa, you may be able to get some things done based on this advisory in the morning, but it's not a guarantee. I would try to have things wrapped up on Monday by sunset, maybe early Tuesday morning when the sun comes up. And then we have kind of a turn to the right there. That's the 3 p.m. position. Now you'll see the values begin to shrink here at the end. That's because what happens is that the numbers that go into the wind speed probabilities, the possibilities really broaden out. So the actual point values kind of decrease. In other words, it means that because the storm is so far away, it doesn't look as impressive in the wind speed probabilities, but it still gives us kind of a rough idea there. So that's category 3, 2 p.m. on Wednesday, and that's forecast near the west coast of Florida. Is this track going to shift? It's possible, and as I mentioned earlier, those, what I said, oblique, which means it's kind of coming at an angle there, a little shift in the track there makes a big difference apart along the coast. I'm not going to say that this is going to be like Charlie, but the lesson from Charlie is that you don't pay attention to where that center point is once the storm gets close. If you're in the area of the storm or the area of the cone, especially in the area of our wind speed probabilities here, that yellow and red area here, you want to be prepared, which basically is from the Keys all the way up the Florida west coast. The lesson from Charlie in 2004, I was here covering it, was everybody in Tampa was under the line, the skinny black line as they called it back then, and everybody in Tampa was getting ready, and folks in Punta Gorda, Port Charlotte, were all hoping, waiting for it to pass off to the west. Not everybody, I know a lot of folks prepared, but then it started to curve a little bit to the right of the line, but still within the forecast cone, and the worst of Charlie came in at Punta Gorda, Port Charlotte, Charlotte County, and then traveled up 17 through Arcadia, just a horrible, horrible storm. And so we want to be careful that kind of situation doesn't happen here. That's a correction on the advisory, so let's see, we'll see an update here. Oh, it's corrected for the next intermediate time. So now that watches are in effect, our next intermediate advisory, which will update the position, will come in there at 8 p.m. tonight. So let's go over a few of the comments here in the chat. Blah, 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 blah. Let me zoom back here. And yes, Floridians. So some of the questions, West Coast, East Coast. It's possible based on the current advisory, the West Coast could see worse conditions, but I don't think that means that over here on the East Coast we're out of the woods yet. I mean, we're in the 4 and 5 day time frame here on the cone, so that's a long way away. Very large elongated system. So the thing about Irma had a huge wind field. Irma took forever to cross from south to north across Florida. I mean, we got into tropical storm conditions in South Florida in the morning hours, and we were in tropical storm conditions for almost 12 hours. It was a long, scary, noisy, windy day with the squalls and stuff like that. This doesn't have enough time to become that big. It can become very intense, and sometimes smaller systems are able to ramp up their intensity more quickly, but I don't think this is going to be a big system in terms of its size. Yeah, it's safe to say I think a lot of us are going to feel it across the peninsula. Thanks for watching. Miami, Broward, Fort Lauderdale, Grand Bahama. Thanks for watching over in the Bahamas. Always have you in our thoughts, especially considering what happened in 2019. And lots of folks watching up the West Coast. Thanks, Naples, all the Keys, as well up in Tampa Bay area and Orlando too. So sounds good. And my personal thoughts on this. So that's a great question, because a lot of times people will contact me offline or text me and say, okay, what's your gut? What do you really think? And sometimes I have a gut. Like with Irma, I had a gut 7 days away. I said, and I put my shutters up 7 days away. With this, I don't have a gut. My sense is we really have to be careful about that turn, because turns are not always well predicted in the models. And so it may start to turn more sharply in the Monday time frame. If that happens, that puts the pressure on the east coast of Florida. The turn may not occur until it's in the Gulf. If that happens, then it's going to really be everybody along the Gulf Coast is threatened. It may not turn much at all, which means the Panhandle has to watch out. Thankfully, folks in the Panhandle, I know you folks are watching with great interest. You're kind of a day later in the timeline here, so you have a little more time to watch and wait. So let's look a little bit. Teacher Planning Day in Miami-Dade. That's great news, because that gives everybody more time to prep if you have the day off, if we can't prep. So once again, Monday is the day that we're prepping if we need to until sunset. And see a few more folks here. So Hermine was named out in the Eastern Atlantic. That was Tropical Depression 10. And so we're going to be stuck with Ian, the I storm, and kind of everybody's like, oh, the I storm. Why does it have to be the I storm? Because the I storm is the most retired storm name of all the storm names. So you've got an Irene, got Irma, Ida, Ivan. I mean, just a ton of I storms. So we don't want to retire another I storm. That alert, by the way, was from the National Weather Service in Miami, saying heavy rainfall possible next week across South Florida from what's right now Tropical Depression number 9. So that's going to be a consideration. I wouldn't be surprised if South Florida Water Management is already trying to get the water out of the canals, to lower the canals to increase their capacity to hold rainwater. Some folks saying hoping for the GFS because it takes some of the pressure off of South Florida. That's right. So I know sometimes folks like to use the word trend. Trend I like to think of as something where it kind of sticks. When you have this you know, it's trending east or trending west, I kind of am more like, that's just kind of maybe a windshield wiper effect. You know, we've had that a lot in the GFS. A trend is where it kind of bends one way and then probably keeps going that way. And you know, the European has been pretty consistent there. So, oh right, Ike, yeah, Ike was retired, of course. How could we forget Ike for Houston? So that's kind of it for today. I'll be, you know, trying to answer questions as we go on Twitter. Besides our preparation, there's really not a lot we can do right now except watch it and stay calm. There's no hype here. We're getting ready. We're getting ready at a steady pace. And if we have to pause because the storm changes track, that's fine. Let me throw in there one more time. If you like the video, please click like, subscribe, get the notifications, because like this morning at 5:20 a.m. I was doing one of these because the advisors were started, and I thought it was important to get that out. And if you guys have any suggestions or anything, I'm always, look, I was on TV for 37 years, so you can say a lot of things, even about my hair or whatever. I don't care. I'm a little thicker skinned, and you know what? I mean, everybody's entitled to their opinion, right? So thanks for watching. Of course, I'll bring you an update tomorrow. I'll do it at 10:30 a.m. because I think the 11 a.m. advisor will be important. So we'll shoot for 10:30 a.m. tomorrow, and then if needed, we will do 4:30 in the afternoon. I think the tentative at 10:30. Let's say it's tentative right now, okay? But I'll send out a notification ahead of time. So thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Appreciate everybody for liking, subscribing, commenting, and of course sharing the video with your friends and family.